Hi, everyone. Welcome to the CSO-led career exploration interviews. My name is CSO Nikhil, and I'm the fifth year elected Chief Science Officer from North High School. As a Chief Science Officer, I wanted to show people that STEM isn't everything, and a big focus has been the environment. So it's been really interesting to strengthen those interests in this interview today. I have the opportunity to interview Dr. Kelly Mott Lacroix today from the Tonto National Forest. Dr. Kelly, how are you?
I'm doing well, and yourself?
I'm doing great. So, would you like to start us off by introducing yourself, your job title, and describe a little bit about yourself and what your job involves?
Sure. I work on the Tonto National Forest, which is one of the national forests in Arizona, and the one that's closest to folks who live in Phoenix. It's about 3 million acres, kind of the backyard of Phoenix for the most part. And my job on the Tonto is I am the forest hydrologist and the person who manages the watershed program for the forest. So my responsibility is watershed health and stream health monitoring for all of the streams on the Tonto. And most people think of the Tonto as being very deserty, but we actually have over 700 miles of perennial streams on the forest. Perennial meaning that the stream flows year round. And I work out of Phoenix, but I get to spend a lot of time out on all of the different districts in my job.
That's awesome. So, I've always wanted to become a doctor, but as I've grown up and being introduced to all these new career options, I'm not sure if that's what I wanted to do, but I wanted to know if that was just like you. What led to this career option, and was it your first one?
So hydrology was always the thing I wanted to do. I mean, I wouldn't say always, because hydrology, most people you say, oh, what's hydrology? And they're like, I don't even know what that is. So I usually say I'm a hydrologist, in other words, a water scientist. But I wanted to work in water for quite a long time. But I'll tell you, when I got started in undergraduate, I didn't think I was smart enough to be a scientist. And I didn't do terribly great in some of my math classes in high school. And I had some teachers who, didn't encourage me. And so my undergraduate degree was actually in political science and Spanish literature. And so I did not start out where I ended up. After I finished undergrad, got a little bit older, gained a little bit of confidence. I was like, wait a second, who's telling me what I can and can't do? And so I went back to night school, did all my chemistry, my physics, my calculus, and then started down my path to become a hydrologist, which is what I do today. So didn't start out where I ended for sure.
That's awesome. I'm only 17, but I've noticed how adults have been a huge part of where I am in my life. I wanted to ask you, were there any teachers, mentors, or even experiences along the way that inspired you into this path?
Yeah. So one of the things that someone told me at one point, you can't be what you can't see, right? You can't see yourself as. And so I count myself incredibly fortunate to throughout my life and career have had women who I could look up to and be a role model for me, and not the least of which was my mother. She was actually a doctor, so I grew up with a mother as a scientist, and doing that sort of work and kind of pioneering the field in terms of being a woman in as a doctor at the time when she was, it's a lot more common now, which is great. But when she was coming up through, it wasn't. And then very fortunate both when I worked at the Department of Water Resources, my supervisor there was a woman named Linda Stitzer, who was just amazing and encouraging to me. And then when I was at the University of Arizona, I had another woman named Dr. Megdal, who really had my back and encouraged me. And so very, very fortunate to have a series of great women in my life.
That's awesome. Just to follow up, do you have any woman that you've never personally met that you look up to ever since maybe even
Ooh,
childhood?
okay. So never personally met, but I did get to see her. When I was in undergrad, I heard a talk from Jane Goodall, and it was hands down one of the most inspiring things I have ever heard. Just, her experience in life and her approach to conservation and the science, just super inspiring. Yeah.
It's funny. That's how I got into the environment as a whole. Seeing her talks about like chimpanzees, that's the only
Yeah.
way I would have heard about the environment. So that's awesome. Um, Being the acting ecosystem staff officer at Tonto National Forest, what is your favorite part about your job?
So in my current job, I am supervising a whole bunch of different people. I'm in charge of the whole thing. So I'll tell you in that current role that I'm actually only in for 2 more weeks. So in my current job, my favorite thing has been learning about all the different resource areas. So, as a staff officer, you are in charge of all of the range folks, the wildlife, hydrology, planning, a whole bunch of different aspects of the forest. And so I've gotten to learn a lot about what my colleagues do. In my regular job, which I'll get to go back to in a couple of weeks now, my favorite thing is definitely being able to get outside. Being the and feeling like I can plan and implement projects where I actually see I might be able to really leave the land better than I saw it, than I found it, which is very, very satisfying.
And connecting into that, we've seen a lot of issues in the environment, and especially with it coming in the news recently, that we have to fix in the coming years. So, what do you see as the biggest challenges in conservation at the moment, and how are these being overcome?
So, not speaking for conservation as a whole, because that's a really big, broad thing, but thinking more of like my own little corner of conservation, and in particular, working in the United States Forest Service, I would say there's three things. The first, and it's one that everybody will, tell you, but I have to say it too, is climate change, right? The second would be capacity to implement work, and the third would be diversity. And climate change is maybe the one that folks talk about the most, but it's challenging for resource managers because we can't use the past as prologue anymore. We have to really be flexible with how we think and manage. I was taking a yoga class actually for the first time since the pandemic a couple of weeks ago, and the teacher's like, come into this with a beginner's mind. Right. And that really stuck with me in terms of my work as well. Like, I have to approach my work with a beginner's mind because climate change has changed the rule book, right? You have all this learning, you have all this stuff you've done, but you can't assume that you know how to do it just because you've done it 10 times before. And I think that's what we all have to start to figure out how to do better with in terms of climate change and adapting to climate change. And in terms of capacity, it's really there's so much work to do. There's so many things that we need to get done in in hydrology, water resource management, and in the Forest Service more specifically. But we don't have a lot of capacity to get it done because we just don't have the people in the agency that we used to. And there's all sorts of reasons for that that I won't bore you with right now. But what's cool about the capacity part of it is we do have a lot of opportunity to increase our capacity, even if we don't have extra people through the use of technology, like doing using ArcGIS for mapping as opposed to having to hand draw things anymore. Or in my work, I've started using a lot of LiDAR data, and that saves me literally weeks of field work where I can go out for a couple of days and field verify what I was seeing in the imagery, and then and as opposed to spending weeks out there, doing all the measurement and things like that. And then for the last one, diversity, back to what I was saying, you can't be what you can't see. If the conservation field doesn't have a good representation of all of the people in the United States, if we don't look like our country, conservation is not going to succeed, and the conservation field in general is not going to succeed because everybody has to care about our lands. Everybody has to care about the environment around them. Otherwise, we're sunk. So.
And kind of tying into that capacity part, have you seen that it's difficult to integrate technology into your work?
Not for me because I'm a computer nerd. I really and folks who know me will make fun of me. Even I actually the greatest compliment I once received was somebody told me my title should be changed to data ninja, and that was like I was like, yes, that is what I want in life, to be considered a data ninja. So I love computers. I love spreadsheets. I love modeling and everything. So it has not been challenging for me because I have that facility. I have seen some of my colleagues, even colleagues who are a similar age to me. I was actually just talking with somebody this week who's talked about how she's starting to fall behind and it's going to go in a different path and no longer do some of the hydrologic modeling anymore because she feels like it's passed her by. So I think it's a great space for people who love spreadsheets and computers, and for younger folks who are a lot more accustomed to it, to be coming up and helping us build our capacity within the natural resource area for sure.
And like you said before, building a diverse workforce in the conservation fields, how do you believe that people who are maybe even students or adults, how do we engage in those resources or experiences related to that field?
Sure. So for hydrology specifically, there's a organization we have in Arizona called the Arizona Hydrological Society, and they even provide for folks out beyond high school, right? Once you're getting into college, they have lots of scholarships. They have lots of internships for people to start to learn about the field. And I'll tell you, as somebody who participates frequently in AHS, there's not a lot of people who apply for those scholarships, right? So those are ways for people to kind of get a start to understand what the breadth of the field might be. But I would say, even more simply, is for folks to just take the time to get outside and to start experiencing these places for themselves, because that's really how the curiosity, right, is how you get engaged with it. And so if you go and you sit on the side of the Salt River for a while and just watch what happens for 10, even 15 minutes, you'll start to get engaged with what's going on in a water resource or any stream for that matter. I just say salt because it's close.
That's awesome. Just get outside. What can people, especially the youth who may not be in the conservation industry or maybe might not think of it as a job, what can they do to help with your work?
Yeah, great question. So the biggest thing I think, and maybe this is starting to sound like a broken record, but is getting outside, finding those places that are special to you, not just kind of a drive, a window tour of our natural environment, but really getting whatever way you can, getting out and being outside and finding places that are special to you. Because once you find a place that's special to you and you care, then you're going to be more engaged when these things come up in conversation. You're going to be able to share what you've seen while you're out with others. And you don't have to be a conservation professional or a scientist or engaged in it at all to care and care for our public lands. And once you're out there and you found that special place, find the way to do your little part to take care of it, right? It may sound cheesy, and we've got, the whole like owl, Hootie the owl, who talks about, give a hoot, don't pollute and all that, but it's very real. Like, we have so much use of our public lands right now. And there are a lot of people who don't understand how to act as well out on the public lands, and they leave trash and other things, or they go off the beaten path, which sounds like fun, but it actually damages the environment. So doing a little thing, even picking up a couple pieces of trash, you've left the place better than you found it, right?
That's awesome. I'm definitely going to go in my backyard after this, just sit out in the grass.
And
So,
you know what? You bring up a really good point. It doesn't have to be going all the way out to the forest, right? Just going and sitting in your grass is and there's some really interesting books that talk about how just even doing that is so important for our well-being. Absolutely.
Exactly. And just to end this off, if you were to give one piece of advice on anything to a 6th to 12th grader, what would it be?
Yeah, so I myself have 6th to 12th graders, and I'm sure they don't listen to any advice I give them, but we'll see. Maybe some kids that aren't my own might listen to me. So my advice is, don't feel like you ever have to end where you start. And kind of back to what I was talking about at the beginning, I started out doing Spanish literature and decided I wanted to be a hydrologist, and so that's where I went. And you're going to have all sorts of interesting things thrown at you through middle school and high school, and some of them will stick and some of them won't. But don't feel like if you're walking down one path you have to keep walking down that path. You can always take a left turn somewhere.
That's definitely such a great piece of advice, and that I'll definitely keep in mind as I go to college next year, which I'm definitely scared
Woohoo!
about.
Do you know what you want to do? Have you thought about it?
I've definitely thought about it. It's either the environmental path, the film path, or the medical path. So they're all very different, but I'm definitely trying to keep my options open.
But you can combine some of those. So actually, the hydrologist who works for me right now, he finished undergrad just a couple of years ago.
Hmm.
He did a double degree in environmental physics and film.
Ooh, okay.
So again, maybe it's not even left or right hand turn. It's like, go both ways. And,
Exactly,
you
exactly.
know, so very cool. Well, that's exciting, and good luck to you starting college. That's definitely some of the most fun times of life.
Thank you, thank you. And thank you, Kelly, for such an awesome interview. That ends off the CSO-led career exploration interviews.